we don't talk about that anymore. I claim that the best 3 years of my life was when I was in the 3rd grade. But Drew and I, all of us kids were born in the same room, the northeast corner of our home there in Fillmore, except for David Marshall, and Dad owed a $2.80 light bill and he couldn't afford to pay it. So Mom went to the midwife's house to have the baby. And the rest, 14 of the rest of us were born in the bedroom at home. And it's hard to comprehend that my father was born 131 years ago, 132 this December. My grandfather was born 180 years ago and walked across the plains. Not many people can say their grandfather walked across the plains.
3 times.
Father's father. Brigham Young called him on an outback mission the next year. And the stake was supposed to furnish him a wagon, a good wagon, and a good ox team. And nobody would give him any oxen. And finally they found a breechy, balky oxen in Kanash, and they gave that to him. And somebody else had one just like it in Scipio. And he was an animal whisperer. But he hooked him up and walked with him to Omaha, Nebraska, 1,000 miles and back. And when he got home, he had one of the better ox teams as there was. Grandpa grew up in Denmark, and he was about 27 when he came here. He left Denmark on the 6th of April, 1862, and he got to Salt Lake on October the 6th, 1862, and went on to Fillmore. He had some cousins in Fillmore, the Beauregards and some other people. Anyway, Mrs. Beauregard said, you know, I've got this beautiful niece over there in Denmark, and you ought to marry her. And anyway, then she decided that it would be better if that woman married her son, and so she kind of backed out on the deal. But Grandpa sent and brought her over here and married her, and her health was very poor. Sent and got her sister, and so he married her before her sister died. And anyway, my father was one of the children of the second wife. Her name was Hansina Jacobina, but they called her Sina, and she died when she was quite young with a bad heart. Dad was born in 1883. They didn't have too many schools back then. They didn't have a high school. Millard High School was built in 1916, but they did have a high school before then, but by the time that high school was organized, he was about 22 years old. When he was a young man, he went out to the west prospecting, and he did get into Lehman's Cave. If you go and look at the books in Lehman's Cave, you'll find the WHR on the ceiling, and they have it in the books out there. You can find it. I never did see it personally, but I looked in the books.
I saw it.
You saw it?
Yeah.
Anyway, he did have, him and his partner went and found gold. What was the name of the?
Osceola.
Osceola. They found gold. They were doing pretty good, and Dad went in to get another grub stake, some groceries, and it took quite a while. By the time he got back, his partner sold the gold mine for $10,000 and disappeared. I asked Dad, I said, didn't that really upset you? And he said, well, not really. It did at the time, but I thought a lot about it, and if I'd had that much money at that age, it had probably ruined my life. So no, I'm not bitter at all. But Dad liked us to work. We spent probably 2.5 months building a fence around a 3-mile fence around the pasture west of Fillmore. But we only put one wire up, and it was an electric fence. And so we dig those holes, and some of that. When we built the corral there, we had to get a jackhammer and go down 18 inches with a jackhammer and put a half a stick of dynamite in the bottom to dig a post hole. It was just like concrete, natural concrete. So it took us quite a while to finish that. But anyway, Dad was on one side of the gate, and I was on the other side of the gate. And he says, you know, we've been working on this for a long time. How long do you think it will take this electricity to travel 3 miles around this fence? You think you can count to 3? And I said, I'll bet I can count to 10. I think I was about 9. He says, if you can count to 3, I'll buy you an ice cream cone. So he says, I'll count down to 3 and then you start counting. So he said, 1, 2, 3, and I went, wah! He says, it works, let's go get an ice cream cone. He was testing it. Anyway, I'll never forget that, but we did go get an ice cream cone. And I learned a lot about electricity. It's a lot faster than I am. Anyway, Mrs. Gregerson, there was a woman who lived down Floa, about 6 miles west of town. And, well, she was crazy. I don't know how else to describe it, but she'd walk to town and get groceries and walk back. And anyway, one day she got a hold of the electric fence and was laying down, and Dad took her home. He was afraid that it might kill her. Anyway, but Drew and I used to have a lot of fun with that electric fence, with that electric, machine. Anyway, yeah. Dad basically pioneered dry farming in East Millard County. He had an old Farmall M tractor, 1940 model, 38 maybe, I don't know, what year was it?
39.
39.
Then he bought it in 41.
And we had a 5-foot plow. And we'd go out and plow brush, and some of the sagebrush was as tall as the tires on the tractor. But anyway, he'd plow that, and then Drew and I, we had some horses, 3-4 horses, and we'd go out and rake it in windrows. And then we had a flamethrower. Took quite a while to get that flamethrower going. You had to pump it up, and then anyway, we'd drop the flamethrower in the brush, and then just kind of drive a horse along. We had two-wheel cart, and we'd go along and burn the brush. One day we were out on West Mountain, and things were going good, and we were burning brush. A whirlwind came down one of those windrows and scattered it all over West Mountain. Uncle Frank happened to be there with us, and so he asked me to take him over to get the tractor over north of east of where we were, about 3-4 miles. And so I went over. I drove him over there. I was 9 years old. And I drove back, and the highway patrolman seen the fire and came out there, and he looked at me and says, "What are you doing driving?" I said, "Well, I just took my uncle over to get the tractor and plow to come over here and plow a fire guard." "Well, it's a good thing you know how to drive, isn't it?" Anyway, we watched that fire burn for about 3 days, and then we went out on the west side of West Mountain, and they almost had it out, and they were just kind of relaxed and waiting for it to burn out. All of a sudden, all these jackrabbits came out of there on fire, spread it again all over the place. I'll never forget that. They had a combine, an old red combine we pulled behind the tractor, and Dad and Uncle Frank decided to buy this John Deere self-propelled. That was in 1950. And Uncle Frank, well, we sold the old combine to the guy in Holden, and Uncle Frank was supposed to go over there and make the deal and bring $1,500 back. And when Uncle Frank came back, he had a check for $15. Dad was quite upset, so Dad went and explained to the guy that it was not $15, but $1,500. So we got the money. When Uncle Frank left on his mission, Drew and I farmed his dry land there in Fillmore, west of Fillmore. So for 2 years we took care of his place while he was on his mission. What can I say? Dad, as Drew mentioned, Dad was a very hard worker, very dedicated. I don't think he was any harder working than my mom. My mom was a saint. She, I don't know how she did it, but she knew how many quarts of everything she had in the basement. She would bottle ketchup, and she'd bottle chili sauce. We call it salsa now, chili sauce. Peaches, grape juice, tomatoes. What else? Everything. Pears, lots of pears. I remember, yeah, delicious. What?
Preserves.
Oh, all kinds of preserves and jams and jellies, yeah.
Green beans.
Yep. Yeah, we had a big garden. We had 3 big gardens. And Dad always wanted a horse that was kind of swing its leg out and put its leg right in the middle. I don't know if they ever got it, but we had an old cultivator. We'd go up down the road, one of us would ride the horse and the other would run the cultivator when we were young. Drew and I don't know how old we were, weren't very old, but we were taking our cows down where the elementary schools are today. It was about 5 or 6 blocks away. We made this wooden cart. It had wood axles and wood tires, wheels, and we had a long rope on it, and I was on the horse, and Drew was on the cart, and we was going down the road pretty good rate. All of a sudden the cart caught on fire. So I drug him through an irrigation ditch to put the fire out. Remember that?
Yeah, that was like funny days.
Yeah, that's exactly where it was. We had probably 45 young boys our age within 2 blocks circumference. We used to have all kinds of night games, and we'd play Run Sheepy Run, Steal the Flag, what else?
Dare base.
Dare base.
No bears are out tonight.
Yeah, and we played Annie over a lot. Kick the can, steal. Yeah, and then we played softball, a lot of softball.
Hide and seek.
Yeah, we had all kinds of games, and basically we didn't have TV. We didn't have these little things you put in your hand and your eyes go square. But we had to entertain ourselves. Drew had a lot better balance than I. He'd get up in the barn, he'd walk across those rafters in the barn, I'd fall off, so I didn't do that. Trouble is, if I fell off, I started that rolling, and so I tried not to fall off. Anyway, Drew built some stilts. And stilts were pretty good, but then he sat on the north side of the garage, and the stilts were about 10 feet tall, at least, where you were standing. And then he'd walk all over, and he'd get pretty close to the electricity up there, but he tried to avoid that. Dad. My dad was a very honest man. He, I had him a farewell, and you probably heard this story, but I had him a missionary. Well, on the first day of, the fast Sunday of January, 1957, the bishop had all the young people that graduated from high school on the stand. He says, "You'll bear your testimonies first." Told the audience, "Don't you bear your testimony until these people get up." So Drew was up there, and Roberta, and you were there, if I remember. Anyway, it got down, and everybody had borne their testimony, and the bishop says, "You're next. It's your turn." I got up and says, I got a missionary farewell in 2 weeks, and I'll bear my testimony then, and amen, and sat down. 2 weeks later, I had my farewell, and I told him the same thing. I'm going to be home from my mission in 30 months, and I'll bear my testimony to you then. The bishop happened to be our neighbor across the street. He came over the next morning. He says, "You didn't tell your mom and dad you loved them last night. I want you to do that before you go. Will you promise me you'll tell your mom and dad you love them?" I said, "Bishop, I'll try." And he says, "No, you're not listening. Listen. Will you promise me that you'll tell your mom and dad you love them before you leave?" And I said, "Bishop, I'll try." And he got a headlock on me and says, "You're not listening. Now listen. Will you promise me?" And I said, "Yes, yes." So I had to go to they called it the mission home in those days. It was 3 or 4 days in Salt Lake, and I sat down and wrote 3 or 4 letters and tore them up. And finally, I had 3 or 4 days home before I left, and Dad wasn't well, but I got Mom in the car. Marcia was down to the high school. Ruby Brunson, for some reason, was riding to Salt Lake with us, and I went down to say goodbye to you at the high school.
Yeah, I was in band.
Yeah. Anyway, I got Mom in the car, and I went back in the house, and I said, "Dad, it's time for me to go, and I have to tell you, Dad, how much I love you. I love you, and I'm going to miss you a lot." And he said, "Oh, don't go. We just got Drew home. Please, don't go. Stay home." And I said, "Dad, I got to go. I love you." And he expressed his love to me, and we hugged each other, and we were both crying, and I left. Those were the last words I said to my dad, because I got a telegram after 20 months that Dad died last night. His last words were, "Tell Don to keep up the good work." Now, be eternally grateful to the bishop who made me promise to tell my folks I loved them before I left. On the way to Salt Lake, I told my mom how much I loved her, and it was not easy to leave, and I know that when Dad died, I called, and Marcia and Mom had been out to the corral milking the cows, and you know, in the winter, the stuff gets pretty deep out there. Oh, I have to tell you, Drew and I used to milk cows, and we used to get in these milk fights. And then it was turned into a rock fight, and Drew was a lot better rock fighter than I was, and I was standing behind this slab fence looking through there, and he threw one right through the slab fence and hit me above my eyes, and I just went back to milking cows. Anyway, I have a lot of fond memories. We did get into quite a bit of mischief, and we won't go there, but oh, I have to tell you this one story. I think it was my 6th birthday. I took the cows out south of town about a mile, and on the way home, I invited friends to a birthday party. I went home and told my mom I was going to have a birthday party, and she says, "No, you're not. We don't have birthday parties. I'm sorry." Well, I've invited all my friends. Go uninvited. I can't remember who I invited. So I did have a birthday party. And that was my only birthday party. We didn't have kindergarten in those days, so I started the 6th grade, and like I said, the best 3 years of my life was the 3rd grade. But anyway, no. I do have fond memories. I struggled in school. My grades were not good. Dad needed a lot of help on the farm, and so every year I'd have to petition for my grades because I'd missed more than 20 days. And every day he'd go plead my cause, and so they'd promote me another year. Anyway, I hated school. Why can't you be like your older sisters? They were smart. What happened to you? And Fran knows. They were abusive, weren't they? Some of the teachers. Yep. Anyway, we made it through, and when I was on a mission, I decided I wanted to be a seminary teacher, and I went back to school and figured out that I was not quite as dumb as I thought I was. So anyway, Hans Rasmussen has given us a great legacy. He was an honorable man. His health, he struggled from the time I was very young. He had part of his stomach removed and had the inlet to his stomach to another place, and had a lot of stomach ulcers. His health was just not good as we grew up. My dad was 53 when I was born, and 58 when Marcia was born.
Wow.
So he was old, as old as our kids think we are at that age. But he did teach us how to work.
Okay.
I have a lot of fond memories. I could go on for a long time, but I
You're out of
want you
time.
to know that we should be honored by our heritage that we have from Hans Rasmussen, William Hans Rasmussen, Katherine Woodhouse Rasmussen, Evangelyn Robison Rasmussen, and they're wonderful people. And you know, one thing about Mom, we always had a picture of Katherine Woodhouse Rasmussen in our home.
They were both in oval point.
Yeah, old pictures, yeah. And Mom always honored Katherine, and we called her Aunt Katherine. I want you to know the Lord loves you, the gospel's true, and we need each other to get where we're going. And my prayer is that when we get where we're going, we want to be where we are and not looking for a better place. Thanks.
Thanks.